the good, the bad, and the weird. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are doing a little bit of a three-piece exhibition on some third-party models, starting of course with the Necrons, as I've had these models for a while now and been wanting to do this. First up we have this cool-ass Grievous Necron fusion, then we have a rather bodacious-looking Nightbringer, and finally just a bit of a weird skorpekh destroyer. We primed gray because it's what I have, and I like starting from gray, and it'll help with Grievous here because of his cape, which we're going to paint white and red in homage to 2003 Clone Wars. But for the metallic body of him, which I am going to stick with the standard color scheme for my Necrons for his body, we are going to start with Black Legion. I'm using a new filming setup, as you can see, and you can see me here fiddling with the lights just to get things looking a bit better. It's going to look a little rough around the edges and inconsistent in this video, but I am doing my best to get this light box up and running, and I think I prefer it significantly to the old sort of unfocused and often poorly shot videos of my past. Not saying this is a masterpiece or anything. You can see me here painting down on the dead commissar on this guy's base with a bit of flesh tone. I'm going to paint this guy in the same color as my guardsman, which is mainly yellow. So I wanted to put down this sort of bone color. I also used Gravelord Gray over all the stone, just to give it a dark metal or stone look for the Necron glyphs, which I think fits quite well. This is, of course, though, up to personal preference. Next up, once you let all that contrast dry, it is time to move on to the next step of painting our Necron Grievous here, who I would personally run as, say, Imitek the Stormlord. What I did was put the basing material down now, just using a pretty standard mud gel from Vallejo. It's very cheap compared to the GW stuff, and while it's a little harder to work with, I think the significantly lower price, comparatively, for how much you get, more than makes it worth it. Just put this around the areas that aren't covered by the sculpted base, and you'll be fine. With all of that down, it's time to move on to the next step, and that will of course be getting down the metal. I started with a huge dry brush, but I moved to a much smaller one, and just mixed up some dark metal, so a little bit of lead belcher and a little bit of black paint, to get a slightly darker finish. So you could use something like Iron Warriors, I believe would work just fine. This, again, just goes over all the body parts of Grievous here. And the reason I do this is it just keeps the recesses a little darker than usual, and I think it just looks good. I'm a big fan of the classic Necron metal look, so it partly inspired my paint scheme for my Necrons. Here you can see me using the smaller dry brush just to get in deeper. And I also did, after this step, of course, start painting up the blades. I did it in the classic General Grievous setup of 2 green and 2 blue. For the blue ones, I actually started off with white paint, as we're going to use a contrast. And for the green blades, I actually used Gauss Blaster Green, which we're going to see here in a moment. Here you can see me putting down the final coats of that on the blades and the little gems or power generators on the hilts, which is just, of course, the standard setup. I actually did slightly mess up on his bottom left sword by putting a little bit of white down first, but Gauss Blaster Green covers pretty well, and even better over white. I also used Vallejo white to paint the outside of his cloak. Again, really useful with the gray. It just went on in a couple thin coats. Really, really not too bad. All of this, though, does definitely make this guy stand out quite a bit, which is why I'm not going super crazy with the chromatic shifting paints that I usually use for my Necrons. I do, of course, use those in certain spots, but I really wanted the model to speak for itself rather than just its paint job. I didn't hit all of the details. There are a few dangly bits on his cape that I personally just covered with white paint instead of painting with something individually. I then used Blood Red, a speed paint from the Army Painter, to hit the inside of the cloak. I realized I should have done this much sooner because it ended up kind of getting on a lot of stuff. So I had to go around and fix all of that, and it actually did seep through onto the back of the cape, which I wasn't even necessarily sure how that happened. I believe it was from some sort of advanced capillary action or something like that. I didn't notice it until it was very, very much too late, and I had to spend quite some time fixing that mistake. I had to basically restart from black because any white I put over it just looked red, so do keep that in mind. Something about the cape, you can see me desperately trying to fix it here, but just making it worse, actually. Yeah, be careful here. I think if I had just hit it with some clean water, it would have done the trick just fine, but what can I say? Hindsight is 2020. And I like to include mistakes sometimes. I don't just want to make it look like everything I do goes perfectly. Not that I'm a stellar painter or anything like that. It's just, I think it's nice to show the reality of painting sometimes. This was very solid over the gray, though. Once you got it in an area that looks nice and red, forever. And it really just complements that 2003 look, which, on the low key, 2003 Clone Wars is like my favorite Star Wars media outside of the original trilogy. That might be controversial, but I think that is some of the rawest Star Wars content there is. I'm not even a huge Star Wars fan anymore, but it is fresh on the mind because I went to go see the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith. It was really cool to see on the big screen after all these years. Here you can see all of the red down and that big mistake. Here you can see about a day later, actually, I had mostly fixed it up. It definitely is noticeable, especially to me, but in that divot you can definitely tell the white's a little bit darker. You can see me putting down the gloss black for the color shifting paint I use on my Necrons. I made this color scheme when I was pretty new to the hobby. I'm not sure if I would use this if I made a new color scheme today, but I kind of like it. It's fun. I painted in the eye sockets, the band on his head between the head crest, I suppose you would call it, and I also painted in on the orb on his chest. Usually for my lords, I would pick out some more details, but for this guy I didn't think it was necessary. I also hit the handles of his lightsabers, let's just call them, with this, and I picked out the casing around the gems at the base of the blades as well. From there, we've actually done most of the work. We would have to, of course, put down the color shifting paint, but we want to let the black fully dry. I'm not sure if it's something in the chemicals they use in those paints, but I have noticed when I was painting this guy that a lot of the black actually got pulled up when I was applying layers of color shifter. So just make sure if you're going to follow along at home to let the black fully dry, and have maybe a couple coats down before you put anything else down. Of course, you can see me using a very small brush here, which I would recommend. You wouldn't want to get this onto any of that white, which you spent all the time getting down, because then you'd have to, again, do quite a bit of work. Corax white, and then going back to the classic white. It's just a pain in the neck, as you saw with that red mistake. I didn't record myself fixing it because it was just kind of boring and frustrating. Here you can see me picking out that gem, as I said earlier. If you wanted some other places you could pick out, my lords usually have their shoulder pauldrons or shoulder blades picked out in the color shifting color, but I just didn't feel like doing that today because, again, I wanted the more so the model to speak for itself. I wanted to really stand out in my army. Plan to get some immortals and build them with war sides with purple blades so you can kind of have his Magna Guards with them. Honestly, I might do another video on this guy and make some like little homebrew rules. I really enjoyed doing stuff like that. So I think that would be fun to give him his proper data sheet, make him a combat beast, and give him a way to buff up some Lich Guard. But anyways, we've spent enough time on the gloss black. Here you can see me using Pilar Glacier, a really interesting contrast paint on the white. This just kind of makes it look like a lightsaber in a way. It keeps that white, slightly tinted blue, and the divots and stuff starts to take on the deeper blue color like you see around the edge of a lightsaber. I'm sure you could do something far more advanced, but I really like this technique, and it looks quite effective and good on the tabletop. It's kind of hard to see, again. I'm not 100% sold on the lighting setup yet. I might need to tweak that more. Here you can just see me putting it on his other blue lightsaber. And then we did actually use biotransference green for the lightsabers that are green. That was a very strange way of saying that sentence. But this just, it does a similar effect, though it just goes for slightly darker. Might be better to actually start with white and then put the biotransference green over. You can see me adjusting the lighting again. But I still quite like this effect. I think it looks quite good. And it's a very classic Necron look. Again, I still think it gets the glowing blade across, even though, I'll admit it, I'm not good enough to do object source lighting. Maybe that's a video I should do, learning how to object source light. But this is just very quick and easy. And instead, don't just get this on the blades, get it on the gem parts of that little caged crystal on the back of the blade down near by the handle. And with that, we just about finished up. I admit, I actually think I forgot to record myself doing the next step for the metal, which I dry brushed on some Grey Knight steel, which is just slightly bluish. It's a slightly different take, but again, I just want him to look very standout in my Necron army. Because I do finally want to finish that. I think part of this video actually was inspired by finishing that, by getting this guy to lead some Lich Guard, and also the Nightbringer, which will be the second part of this video, but we'll get to that later. Here you can see the model is effectively done. All that is left is to put down the color shifting paints, though. I did also put on a layer of Apothecary White onto his cape. Here you can see me putting down the sort of electric blue-purple on the gem in his chest and the band on his head. It looks slightly milky because it needs a very interesting medium that really makes it hard to gauge how much paint's on the model. So it's going to look just milky and weird until it's fully dried, in which case it'll be a brilliant blue, which I quite like. This does take a few coats, and as I mentioned, I actually did mess up. I messed up, I don't know how, but I just peeled the gloss black off of the parts that are being made blue and purple, rather. So I had to go back in, just pull all of that messed up paint off and reapply it. It's really not a big deal, but still, just keep that in mind. I'm not entirely sure what set it off. I used a greenish gold, if I'm not mistaken, for the eye sockets. Maybe a red would have been better, but I quite like this look. Just adds in a little bit of contrast. Even though I think I kind of messed up on the eyes, they still look quite effective after all of that milky medium has dried away. They're definitely some of the more interesting paints to work with, again, just because their medium is so strange. It often makes the paint look like a completely different color until it's dried, but such is the price you pay for really silly paint effects, I suppose. But once you get all of that down, you are pretty much done. You do have to finish your base, which I did off camera. I just made all of the cloth, so his coat, hat, stuff like that, yellow, using Flash Gets Yellow, I believe it is, a contrast paint. And then I just did an all-over wash of a dirty brown color, and then just covered his innards with a bunch of Blood for the Blood God to get it looking glistening and red, and I spilled a little bit over onto the edges. Do any other touch-ups you need to, and you're effectively done. As you can see from this next shot we're going to move to now. Overall, I really, really like this model. I really like General Grievous, I always have, so it is really cool to just have a Necron interpretation of him in a way that I can pretty seamlessly use him in 40k. I think he would fit as sort of a Destroyer Lord, just because of his more aggressive look, and Necron characters aren't very fighty, so it's a little bit of a shame, but I still quite like it. Here you can see me doing the final touch-ups on the base because I needed to get more of that Ushabti bone down. Now, I really should have done this earlier in the painting process because it wo't have been annoying to fix. Anyways, we are now back with our very interesting, shall we say, very interesting Nightbringer. So this model, again, I've had for a while, so it's a little bit dusty. But fitting of the Nightbringer, we're just going to cover her entire body with Black Legion. This just gets a very, very dark black down very quickly, and that's how I prefer the Nightbringer to look. I've never been a fan of like very gray or like silvery skin tones for the Nightbringer, and the sort of strange face on this one, if you will, which is more of a collection of polygons than an actual face, lends itself more to the unknowable danger of a star god. It also means that painting this gal, I suppose, is going to be very, very quick. It's really no time at all. You just have to let all of this dry. Once you get it all down, you can see me here applying it over that very strange head, which I actually quite enjoy. I think it's my favorite part of the model. It's just the sort of strange, otherworldly head. It feels like it leans more so into what the Void Dragon looks like than the Nightbringer, which I'm not complaining about. As you can see, I did have to base this model up significantly. You can't get this model in proper sizes. I just made a mistake, so I based her up to be the right size with the official Nightbringer. I then painted all of these glass stones, or I'm not sure the material, with gray. Took a few coats to get it fully even, but we're going to make this all a warmer color just to complement the very cold color scheme that the Nightbringer is going to have. I also put down more of course, the same just mud paste, because all of my Necrons have a dark, muddy base, which I kind of regret doing. But there's too many of them that are based, and I'm not going to go back. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe sand would have been a better option, but I've stopped using actual sand for basing ever since I moved to texture paste, and I recommend you do the same. It will take some time for all of that Black Legion to dry, so just be cautious of it while you are putting down all that gray, as you can see here. I then mixed up 3 different kinds of speed paints, a bone color, a flesh color, and a brown color. Sorry, not flesh color, black, brown, and bone. And then I just put that all over the stones. It just makes a very nice, warm color with very dark darks to hide any potential mistakes so no light peeks through those glass stones. Again, I don't know if they're actually glass. I'm not sure of the material, but that's just what they look like. Get this all over the stones and then let that dry for a while. Make sure you hit everywhere. It honestly is just a very nice effect, I think. It does make her a lot less naturally imposing, I suppose, because she's not naturally that tall. But floating over rocks is still pretty eerie, so I think it fits quite well. Thankfully, the darkness of the shadows means you don't have to be too cautious of it, as it just kind of blends with the black should you get any on it. From there, we're almost done. All that's really left to do is to make the black of her entire everything more interesting. Using a small dry brush and a little bit of Corax black, which is a slightly off black, I begin to dry brush over most of her body, her cloak, though I did avoid the scythe. I don't think you have to. I don't think it's that big of a deal. This is very subtle, but it just adds in some more interesting colors and makes the model easier to read, but that's really going to be driven to the next level with the next step of dry brushing. If you don't know how to dry brush, it's fairly simple. Get some paint on a frayed brush, get most of it off on some paper towel, and then just lightly flick over the details of a model, and you'll pick out most things. I then moved on to using a gray color. I started with the scythe, though I got admittedly a little bit too much on, but since it's the tip of the scythe, I just reinforced that color to make it look really gleaming. Then hit the rest of the scythe with this gray, and it just brings out a lot of the detail while still remaining very dark. It may look very stark when you put it on, but most paints dry about a shade darker than they go on wet. This goes over everything that makes up the Nightbringer itself. Her cloak, I'm saying her. I guess it, he, whatever you want to call it, it's a star god. This model just obviously is presenting some female attributes, let's just put it that way. This goes over everything, though. This is a super easy way to make your blacks more interesting, just because they stand out more. Once you dry brush over the raised areas, you just have slightly more interesting colors, even once you're out of this very powerful overhead lighting. It's very simple. Again, painting the Nightbringer here only took me probably 40 minutes of hands-on painting time. The rest of it was just waiting for everything to dry, as there is admittedly quite a lot of surface area on the setup I have here. If you got this model in a bigger size, which I should have done, it would be even quicker, because then you wouldn't have to wait for all those paint and layers to dry on these stones. And our final entrant, we have this Skorpekh Destroyer. Now, this may seem like a bit of a double back over the Nightbringer, but the reason I think this model is so strange is because, yes, this is a Necron with an anime girl head, which is admittedly not that uncommon. Again, we start with Black Legion, though we skip over the blade and the hair, and we start to dry brush that dark silver over. The reason I find this so strange is it is just a Skorpekh Destroyer with an anime girl head. Not really sure why. Most of these kind of style of miniatures that you'll see all over, Colts 3D or, I can't remember the name of the other website, Etsy, for example, will have these, but also chests, let's just say that, and more female attributes. But this one really doesn't. It just looks like my Skorpekh Destroyers, though admittedly shorter, and with a regular person head. It's just a little odd, and that's the whole point of the weird section of these videos. If you couldn't pick up on it, the good is just a miniature I find cool. The bad is in the more modern sense of that word. Usually just going to be some sort of female miniature on a range that traditionally isn't, Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, Necrons. Though that will make the Sisters episode a little interesting. Maybe I'll have to find some male Sisters models. Yeah, this is just a bit of a strange one. It's like they got a quarter of the way through making a traditional anime girl Nekron and just kind of gave up. Not that I mind, I think it's actually kind of funny. I painted the hair with Gauss Blaster green because, again, I'm going to go for a glowing green look on the hair because I think that fits. I could have gone for color shifter, but I think that would have lost most of the details. That works best on flat panels. Here you can see me applying the Mantis Warrior green contrast paint, which is just really vibrant. It's very nice to get this kind of glowing look, very almost radioactive, and I just put this all over the hair. I did also paint in the eyes white, and thankfully these models have much clearer faces than you might expect. Their eyes are much wider, again, anime influence. So I just painted those in white, and we're going to be hitting those with biotan green. I did have to do some touching up, but honestly I think the eyes on this model came out quite good. They're very small still. Here you can see me using some of that dark metal to touch up on the eyes so they don't look completely insane. Once you apply the green wash, they kind of just look like eyes. It's honestly kind of a morale booster to paint faces like this, just because their eyes are so much easier to paint. I did also apply a brighter dry brush of a Stormhost Silver or something similar to get a bit of contrast in the metal. You can see the gloss black on the big Hyperphase blade. That's going to be painted with a greenish gold color, or a red gold color from my color shifting range of paints. I have a handful of them from Vallejo. I think they still make them. But I use such small amounts I haven't had to restock in years. You can see me applying it. This one has slightly more accurate medium color. It just looks more red and gold. So you'll have to just apply that, let it all dry, apply another coat, and you have these really otherworldly looking blades. There's really not too much to this model. It's just a Skorpekh destroyer with an anime girl head, but I think she fits the bill. Anyways, I really enjoyed painting all of these models. They're all very well done. I'm not trying to throw shade at anyone who wants these models or makes these models. I really like Grievous here. He's easily my favorite. Those blades, I think, came out really good. And while the Nightbringer here is probably a bit more curvy than I would usually run a model in, hey, if I need 300 points to fill up my Necron army, she does the job, and painting her was super fast, which always makes you feel good. And then finally, our strange little anime Skorpekh destroyer was just kind of strange. She was easy to paint because she's a Necron, and Necrons are very easy to paint. But aside from that, I mean, there really isn't that much to say about her. She's just a weird little anime Necron girl. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you thought down below. I did try to do a little bit more editing here with some transitions on those little sequences, the obvious new lighting box. Any tips or tricks you want to let me know down below, and what factions you want to see next time, make sure to let me know as well. I am thinking we're going to do Chaos Space Marines next, as I already have the minis for that, and then I believe the Tau won the vote for the next faction, but leave any you want to know down below. If there's a lot of support for one, we'll push them up the bracket. I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.